There's still a dent in the wall where the picture frame hit. She said it slipped. I said nothing. But I remember how her hand looked. Steady, deliberate, unbothered. The photo inside. Me, holding a newborn. I never picked it up. You know how silence feels at 3:17 a.m. when two people are pretending to sleep, but neither one is breathing right. That's where this started. Not the affair. Not the test. Just the rot. She rolled over and whispered, "You're not acting like yourself lately." I stared at the ceiling. The fan spun. The lies spun faster. Then she added, so softly I almost missed it, "Maybe you're not who you think you are." Not what, not how, but who. That's when I knew. 3 days later, I found a hair, curly, dark, not mine, on the headrest of my car. She'd borrowed it that week to go meet a friend for lunch. Same day, I noticed the photo album was missing from the shelf. She always used to flip through it when she got nostalgic or needed to fake it. I checked the album later. The baby photos were gone, torn out clean, like a surgeon had removed them, left only the couple shots. Us pretending. Her pretending. I didn't confront her. I bought a DNA kit. The last thing I said before I left was, "Do we have any stamps?" She nodded, still scrolling on her phone. Bottom drawer. That's where the results came too. Bottom drawer. Standard white envelope. Standard font. But the sentence inside carved my brain like a carving fork. Paternity not established. I remember I sat on the floor for an hour. The fridge buzzed. The dog barked outside. The world continued like nothing snapped. But something did. I walked into her studio, the one she decorated with dried eucalyptus and fake fairy lights, and left the envelope right there on her ivory photoshoot bench. She called it her posing throne. I called it the crime scene. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't even take my charger. I walked out the back door, past the mailbox, and vanished. Off the grid, off the records, off the map. 10 years. 10 years of silence. Not even a whisper between us. I didn't check her socials. I didn't ask mutuals. I didn't peek at the past. Until last Thursday. A manila envelope showed up in my new apartment, addressed to the name I haven't used in a decade. No note. No return label. Inside, a photo of that same ivory bench. But this time, it was shattered. Burn marks on the legs. Blood on the floor. And taped to the back was a post-it. 5 words, in her handwriting. "He was never just yours." I stared at it for a long, long time. And then I bought the return ticket. Because if she wanted silence, she should have never mailed that envelope. I didn't go back to the house. That would have been too easy. Too obvious. And I already knew it wouldn't be there. Instead, I went to the studio. It was dusk when I arrived. One of those dying sky evenings where everything's orange and gray and aching. The building looked the same at first glance, but the details told a different story. The flowers out front were dead. The door had a new lock. The sign was gone. Most of the windows were covered from the inside with black paint, as if she didn't want the light to get in or anything else to get out. But what struck me most was the silence. The kind of silence that feels like it's watching you. I circled the back. The ivy I once trimmed every spring now grew wild along the bricks. I tried the rear door, still unlocked. I pushed it open, and the smell hit me like a slap. Burnt fabric, dust, and something else. Chemical, metallic, like scorched hair or melted plastic. The studio was abandoned. Not just empty, abandoned. Camera wires dangled like veins. The shelves were gutted. There were holes in the floor where tripods used to stand. The bench, the posing throne, was gone. Only 4 broken legs remained in the corner, splintered and blackened. I stepped around the remains and saw what I didn't expect. In the middle of the room, the floorboards were cut open. Not cleanly. Ripped, like someone had clawed them up in a panic. Beneath them, charred ash. Some of it still clumped. Like whatever burned hadn't finished. I bent down to look closer, and my hand brushed something sharp. A shard of glass. Then another. Then something soft. Fabric. I pulled it out slowly. A child's onesie. Faded blue, singed at the edges. A pattern of tiny planets and stars, mostly peeled off. I hadn't seen it in a decade, but I recognized it instantly. It was Olive's. The one she wore the week before I left. The one I put her in that night I rocked her to sleep, humming a lullaby with a lump in my throat. The one from the memory I refused to relive. My knees buckled. What was it doing under the floor? Why was it burned? I wanted to scream, but my voice had gone somewhere else. My body was frozen in place. I just stared at it, holding it with trembling fingers, while a wave of nausea washed over me. I should have left then. Any normal man would have run. But I'm not normal anymore. That part of me died when I opened the envelope 10 years ago. I stayed. I sat in the ash and the dust, my back against the cold wall, and I waited for something I couldn't name. A sign. A ghost. An answer. It came at 11:47 p.m. My phone, registered under a false name, in a city where no one should know me, buzzed once. No number. Just a single message. Check the basement. Before they do. I didn't even know the studio had a basement. But I know now. And after what I found down there, I wish I'd never come back. The studio never had a basement. I was sure of it. When Lila and I first toured the building before signing the lease, she asked the old realtor, some guy named Trent with an awful comb-over, if there was extra storage underneath. He'd chuckled and said, "Not unless you're planning to dig it yourself." I remembered that line. I remembered everything. So when I stood in the corner of the studio, still holding Olive's scorched onesie in one hand and my phone with the message in the other, the world tilted sideways. There shouldn't have been a trapdoor under the rug. There shouldn't have been steps. But there they were. Crude, narrow, wooden, leading down into blackness. My breath felt sharp in my lungs. I stared into the dark for at least 5 minutes, trying to convince myself I was hallucinating, that maybe the years had broken something loose in my head. But I could feel the air drifting upward from that opening, cold and damp like something had been waiting. I flicked on my phone flashlight and started descending, one creaking step at a time. The smell hit first. Not death. Worse, memories. Mildew, wet paint, citrus floor cleaner, and something faintly metallic underneath. The kind of scent that shouldn't linger for a decade unless someone preserved it on purpose. When I reached the bottom, the floor was cement. Unfinished. I panned my light across the space. A single room. Walls covered in plastic sheets. A rusted-out furnace in the corner. And in the center, a folding table with one object on top. A photo frame. I stepped closer and felt the hair on the back of my neck rise. It was a photo of me, holding Olive. Same photo that had once sat on our living room shelf. Same one Lila had thrown against the wall, the glass shattering into a dozen memories I tried not to pick up. But the glass in this one wasn't broken. It was spotless. Taped to the back was a handwritten note. Not Lila's handwriting. "You left." She didn't. I nearly dropped the frame. I turned around in a panic, expecting someone to be standing there, watching. But the room was still empty. I looked back at the table. There was something else beneath the frame, an envelope. Same brand as the one that held the DNA results 10 years ago. This one wasn't sealed. I pulled out the contents slowly. Not more lab results. A journal page, dated 6 years after I vanished. In Lila's handwriting. "He won't let me move on." Not really. He says if I tell the truth, Olive will be taken. But how do I keep lying to her when she asks about her real father? She thinks it was Dorian. She thinks he died. I wish he had. My head started spinning. 6 years after I disappeared, Lila was writing about Olive. Meaning, Olive was alive. Or had been. But no one ever filed a missing persons report for me. I checked years ago. No online trace. Not even on those creepy "have you seen me" databases. No death certificate. No obituary. If Lila had told Olive I died, then what was she hiding from? Who was he? And why was this hidden under a fake floor in a building everyone thought was empty? My phone buzzed again. New message. Same blank number. "Don't take the stairs back up. Use the side exit. Now." There was no time to think. I spun toward the far wall and noticed it for the first time. A narrow doorway behind the hanging plastic sheets. I slipped through it just as I heard footsteps upstairs. Not hers. Heavier. Slower. Purposeful. Whoever it was, they were looking for something. Or someone. And I had no intention of being found. Not yet. The exit led me into an alley. I didn't remember being there. The studio had changed, expanded, maybe? Someone had added drywall where there hadn't been any before. Whoever had been using the building wasn't just squatting. They had redesigned it from the inside out, like they were building a secret beneath the town's nose. I kept walking. The further I got from the building, the more my thoughts unraveled. My hands were shaking. Not from cold, from the realization that someone had been watching me since I returned. That photo hadn't been sent by accident. That message hadn't come from nowhere. And the journal entry? It was too carefully placed. Almost staged. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. Someone wanted me to see something. But why now after 10 years? I ducked into a 24-hour diner across from the highway and sat in the last booth, facing the door. It was almost midnight, and the only other customers were two teenagers sharing a milkshake and a man in a reflective vest asleep over a plate of cold eggs. I ordered coffee I wouldn't drink just to look like I belonged. I pulled the journal page from my jacket pocket and reread it under the greasy light. She thinks he died. Why would Lila tell Olive I was dead? I could have lived with her calling me a coward, or a liar, or even a monster. But dead? Then again, maybe it wasn't just about me. She said he wouldn't let her move on. Who was he? And why would that man care whether Olive believed I was dead? Suddenly, the air in the diner shifted. I didn't hear the bell ring, but I felt someone enter. You know that sensation, like gravity just changes direction slightly, and your skin tightens before your brain catches up? I looked up and froze. A woman in a gray hoodie was walking toward me. Not old, not young. Mid-20s maybe. Eyes locked on mine like she knew me. I didn't recognize her, but something in her face felt familiar, like a name I couldn't place on the tip of my tongue. She didn't sit down. She didn't smile. She just slid a sealed manila folder onto the table. I shouldn't be doing this, she whispered. But you need to see. I didn't say a word. She turned and left before I could even ask her name. The folder sat there like it was ticking. I opened it slowly. Inside were 8 photographs. All printed. Matte finish. No timestamps. No markings. The first one showed a small, windowless room. Olive green walls. An old twin bed. A small bookshelf. The second, same room, different angle. This time, a girl sat on the bed. Barely 8 or 9. Curly dark hair. Big eyes. Holding a stuffed rabbit. She looked like Olive. Or how I imagined Olive might have looked, had I stayed. My stomach twisted. The third photo showed her again. Same room. A year older. Blank expression. Wearing the same sweater. The fourth, same room, now with bars on the windows. The fifth, now she's older. 13, maybe 14. Holding a sign. My name written on it in marker. Dorian. The sixth photo nearly made me drop the folder. It was of Lila, standing behind the girl, smiling. The seventh, someone else now. A man I didn't recognize. Late 40s, with a deep scar running from his jaw to his collarbone. Standing in the doorway of the same room. His face was blurred, not digitally. The camera had caught him mid-move, but you could feel the menace radiating from the image. The eighth photo was blank. Just a black square. I flipped it over. On the back was a handwritten message. You left the wrong girl behind. She waited. Until she didn't. I sat there, dizzy, mouth dry, mind racing. Had Olive been held somewhere? Was Lila part of it? Or was she trying to protect her from someone else? And then another realization hit me. Something more immediate, more terrifying than anything else. If that was Olive in the pictures, who sent the folder? Because whoever took those photos, they were still watching her. And they knew exactly where I was. I couldn't sleep that night. Not even pretend to. I left the diner at 3:12 a.m. After sitting in that booth for hours, reading the photographs over and over like they might suddenly give me a different answer. But the facts didn't change. Someone had been watching Olive. For years. They had photos going back to when she was barely a child, and somehow Lila was in those same frames. Smiling. Present. And yet, I had vanished from both their lives like I was a ghost they'd buried together. I booked a motel room under a fake name on the edge of town, the kind of place where no one makes eye contact and the front desk clerk doesn't ask questions. I sat on the stiff bed with the manila folder open beside me, one photo in particular still burning into my vision. The girl holding the sign with my name on it. My name, Dorian, in messy black marker. She looked at the camera like she was trying to say something without words. Like the act of holding that sign was dangerous. Like someone had told her not to. And yet she did it anyway. For me? Or for someone pretending to be me? That thought lodged in my gut and wouldn't let go. By morning, I had made up my mind. I was going to find out who the man with the scar was. I didn't care what it took. I didn't care how far this went. I needed answers, real ones. And the truth was no longer optional. I called in the only favor I still had from my old life. Back before I vanished, I had a friend named Mason who worked freelance IT security for law firms and occasionally dabbled in the gray area between private investigator and legal hacker. We hadn't spoken in nearly a decade, but I still remembered his encrypted number. He picked up on the third ring and didn't even say hello. Dorian, he asked, half awake. You're not dead. Not yet, I muttered. But I need your help. 10 hours later, we met in the back of a church parking lot. He looked older, rougher, like life hadn't treated him much better than it had me. I handed him the photo of the scarred man and asked for everything: name, background, connections, anything that would tie him to Lila or Olive. Mason studied it for 30 seconds, then swore under his breath. I've seen this guy before. Not personally, but through work. His name's Nolan Haverford. Ex-military. Dishonorably discharged. He's off the grid now. Used to be attached to some underground contractor group in Louisiana that shut down under federal investigation 5 years ago. And now he's a ghost. But not the kind that hides. The kind that waits. I didn't like the sound of that. Mason pulled out his laptop and connected to a private database. After some digging, he found 2 relevant addresses linked to Nolan's alias. One of them was an abandoned property just 2 towns over. Rural. Remote. Listed as condemned, but still showed intermittent utility usage. We both looked at each other. I didn't have to say anything. We were going. By late afternoon, we were parked down the road from a property that looked like a scene from a forgotten crime show. Chain-link fence rusted and twisted open. Mailbox dented and leaning sideways. A satellite dish hanging by one screw. The grass was up to my knees. There were cameras, but they were old. Or decoys. Either way, I had the feeling this wasn't Nolan's home. It was a cage. The closer we got, the more the air felt wrong. There was no sound. No birds. No wind. Like something in this place didn't want to be disturbed. I stepped onto the porch and noticed the door wasn't locked. Just closed. Inside, the house was empty. At least, it pretended to be. No furniture, no lights, just bare floors and that chemical smell again. The same one I'd noticed in the studio basement. I followed it to a back room. Mason hung back, phone camera ready in case anything went south. I pushed open the door and there, on the wall, were photos. Hundreds of them. Taped, pinned, strung together. Photos of Olive. Photos of me. Photos of Lila. All taken over the years, from different angles, different times, different states. One photo stopped me cold. It was of Olive, last week. Wearing the same hoodie as the girl who handed me the manila folder in the diner. My hands started to shake. The girl in the diner wasn't just some messenger. She was Olive. And she had come to find me. Which meant she'd escaped something. Or someone. But if she was free, why was Nolan still following her? And what was she running from now? I didn't tell Mason who I thought the girl in the diner was. I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to hear it out loud. Because if I was wrong, I'd spiral. And if I was right, then Olive had grown up believing I was a dead man. Only to risk everything to find me. Either way, the weight of it pressed against my lungs like an anchor, and it wouldn't let up. We collected what we could from the house. Photos. Wires. Notes. Nolan's place wasn't just some hideout. It was a surveillance dump. There were camera logs, timestamps, and printouts of what looked like intercepted texts. Not just mine. Lila's too. Most of it was coded, using aliases and initials. But a few phrases were clear as day. Target has relocated. She's asking about him again. Authorization pending. It didn't feel like personal obsession. This felt bigger, clinical, like they were tracking us as part of something procedural, controlled. And then Mason found a small, charred USB drive taped under the sink. It was covered in soot like it had survived a fire, but it was intact. We didn't plug it in yet. Too risky. If Nolan had wired any of this to trigger remote alerts, we weren't going to be the ones lighting the fuse. Instead, we split up. Mason went to his safe house to run data forensics on the USB. I went back to the only place I hadn't searched, Lila's house. She had moved. I knew that. The old place where we used to live was sold years ago. But a background search led me to a property 2 neighborhoods over. A townhouse with an overgrown lawn, grayed-out siding, and a single porch light flickering like it was trying to die. I waited until just after 2 a.m. No cars in the driveway. No lights on. No security system. Lila never liked tech she didn't understand. Still, I used gloves. Quiet entry. Picked the lock like someone who'd been gone 10 years, but hadn't forgotten how to disappear. The inside of the house smelled faintly like lavender and dust. The kind of scent that clings to people trying to seem calm when they're actually unraveling. There were signs of her everywhere. Empty teacups on the coffee table, half-finished notebooks stacked on shelves, old camera lenses scattered on a sideboard like paperweights. But no photos. Not of Olive. Not of me. Not even of her. Not a single frame on the walls. Not a family photo in sight. It was like Lila had erased every image that told the truth. I searched the bedroom last. Top drawer, nothing but socks. Bottom drawer, locked. I used the same old trick, slid a bobby pin from behind the vanity mirror and popped it open. Inside was a small wooden box. Smooth, worn, with a latch. I opened it. There, neatly stacked, were letters. Some addressed to me. Most never sent. And under them, a black leather journal. The pages were thin, curled at the edges. The first entries were dated 5 years ago. He knows. I don't know how, but Nolan knows I lied. About Dorian. About Olive. I think he's watching us again. I think he never stopped. Another entry, a few weeks later. She's starting to remember things I never told her. She asked about the man in the hospital room. She thinks it was her real father. I told her he died. She cried for 3 hours. I am a monster. And then one that shook me harder than any of the others. They said I could keep her if I played along. That she was safer if the world believed Dorian was dead. That if he came back, it would trigger everything. Now I think they were wrong. Now I think they were always going to take her, no matter what I did. I had to sit down. Everything I believed, about the betrayal, the DNA test, the lies, was splintering. What if Lila hadn't been the mastermind? What if she'd been trapped in something darker? What if the test was never about biology? What if it was bait? And I had walked away right when they needed me to. Suddenly, behind me, a floorboard creaked. I turned slowly. Someone else was in the house. And I had left the journal wide open on the bed. I froze. That creak wasn't the house settling. It was deliberate. Close. I grabbed the journal and shoved it into my coat just as another footstep echoed down the hall. Then another, slower, heavier. My body locked up. My thoughts screamed run, but my limbs refused. Years of silence, buried grief, and impossible questions had been clawing at me like ghosts, and now one of them was walking toward me with real footsteps. I stepped out of the bedroom, silent, pressing myself against the wall just beside the doorframe. Whoever was coming, they hadn't seen me yet. The hallway light flicked on. Soft. Dim. Someone had hit the switch. Then I heard her voice. Soft. Controlled. Familiar. Put it back, Dorian. You were never meant to read that. Lila. Her voice had aged. Hardened. But it was her. And it was so casual, so eerily calm, that it shook me more than if she had screamed. I stepped out and faced her. She was standing at the end of the hall in a gray robe, barefoot, holding a mug like she'd just woken from a dream. Her eyes locked on mine and didn't flinch. She didn't ask where I'd been. She didn't act surprised to see me. She just looked tired. I held up the journal. You lied, I said. You told her I was dead. I had to. She whispered, not even blinking. You think I wanted to? You think I enjoyed any of this? You let me walk out. You didn't stop me. You don't understand what I was protecting you from. Then explain it, I snapped. Explain why there's a man named Nolan with a wall full of photos of my daughter. Explain the USB drive, the letters, the onesie buried in the floor of your studio. She took a breath and finally looked away. Because the DNA test was real, she said. But it was never meant to reach you. That stopped me cold. What? She stepped closer, slowly, like talking to a scared animal. The sample you sent. It wasn't intercepted, but the results you got? Those weren't complete. I saw the lab report. No, Dorian. You saw a report. Not the one. I couldn't breathe. They replaced the final file before it was mailed. I didn't know until after you left. I got a call. They said it was cleaner this way. That if you stayed, things would spiral out of control. Who's that? She didn't answer. Not directly. But her hands began to shake, and when she sat on the edge of the couch, her shoulders curled like she'd been holding this posture for years. They were watching me before Olive was even born. I was part of a genetic counseling study back in college. Voluntary, nothing shady. But someone flagged my data. Something about inheritance patterns. I didn't think anything of it at the time. But after I got pregnant, they showed up. Who? They called themselves the Institute. That's all I ever got. They said Olive was part of a long-term behavioral and cognitive mapping trial. That she was rare, statistically significant. I thought it was just academic, tracking health, intelligence scores. I signed the forms. Her voice cracked. Then you sent the test. And they panicked. Because if you had stayed, you would have started asking the right questions. You would have pulled at the threads. I felt like I was going to throw up. You told me I wasn't her father. I never said that, she snapped. They did. You just believed it because it broke you. Because it was easier than believing something worse. I stood there shaking, holding the journal like it might combust in my hand. So what is the truth then? Am I her father or not? Lila looked up at me, her face pale, her voice barely a whisper. You were. You are. But not the only one. The room fell silent. What the hell does that mean? She got up, walked to a drawer I hadn't checked, and pulled out a folder. Not photos. Not documents. A birth certificate. Olive's name. My name listed under father. But also another line beneath it. Donor ID, 1780C. Lab, every gene closed. Status, classified. I got pregnant through IVF, she said. You know that. But what I didn't know at the time was that they used both your material and theirs. That's not how IVF works. With them, it is. I backed away, ball rising in my throat. You let them experiment on our daughter? I didn't know until years later. By then, I couldn't undo it. Suddenly, everything made sense, and nothing did. Olive's behavior, her disappearance, the surveillance, the photos, the black square. She wasn't just a daughter. She was a subject, a possession, and she had escaped. Where is she? I asked. I don't know. Liar. I swear to you I don't. She left 3 months ago. No warning. No message. Just gone. You said if I came back, it would trigger everything. It has, Lila whispered. They know you're here. And if you find her before they do, they'll come for both of you. I took one step toward the door. She didn't stop me this time either. But just before I left, she said something that turned my blood to ice. She kept one thing with her when she left. I paused. What? Lila looked straight at me, eyes empty. That burned onesie you found. I didn't move. She was the one who buried it. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a minute. I sat in my car outside Lila's house until dawn, watching the sky turn from charcoal to soft blue, trying to make sense of the shattered puzzle in my head. My daughter had been born into a lie. Tracked, measured, watched, and somewhere in all of that, she had grown strong enough to vanish on her own. But she hadn't run from me. She had found me. The girl in the diner. The one who handed me the folder without saying her name. The one who knew where to find me even after 10 years. That was Olive. And she had risked it all to make sure I saw the truth. I owed her everything now. When the sun came up, I drove to the last place I hadn't checked. Not the studio. Not Lila's house. Not Nolan's den of surveillance. The hospital. Not the big one in the city. The smaller research annex where Lila had once gone for prenatal visits. The place that showed up once, buried in a reference in her journal. A name I hadn't thought about in years. Carmen Behavioral Genetics Unit. It had closed 5 years ago. On paper, at least. But I didn't need it to be open. I just needed a name on a forgotten file. And I found it. Mason helped me access an offline backup stored on a former employee's server. It took him 4 hours and a half-empty bottle of bourbon, but he did it. Inside the digital archive was a list of subjects marked unresolved assets. One of them, OR 103-17B. Name, Olive R. Haverford-Gray. Status, subject and field, monitoring suspended. Suspended. She had slipped the net, and now they were trying to erase the evidence that she'd ever existed. But Olive had left a trail on purpose. She wanted me to find her. And one clue I hadn't fully understood until now was that black photo in the folder. The one with no image on it. I held it up again under natural light this time, and saw it. Not a photo. A UV mark. Coordinates. 1 hour later, I was standing at the edge of an abandoned campground on the edge of Foxridge County. The cabins were rotted, the trail signs faded, the fire pits full of soggy ash and wild grass. But cabin number 3 had something the others didn't. A wind chime made of copper keys, and a note taped to the door. You're late, but you made it. I didn't breathe. I didn't knock. I pushed the door open. She was sitting on the floor, cross-legged, in a hoodie far too big for her, holding a sketchbook. She looked up, and I froze. Her face, older, sharper, but those same storm gray eyes. The same nose she scrunched when she was thinking. My nose. She didn't look surprised, just tired. I stepped forward, unsure if I was allowed to move. But then she said it. The one thing I'd wanted to hear for 10 years. Hi, Dad. I dropped to my knees. My voice cracked. You remember me? I never forgot. I reached out, and she leaned in. We didn't say much for a while. Just sat there in the silence, both of us relearning how to breathe in the same space. When she finally spoke again, it was with a strength I didn't expect. I know why you left, she said. But next time, don't. I won't, I whispered. I swear, not ever again. We stayed in that cabin for the rest of the day. She told me everything. How she uncovered the truth piece by piece. How Nolan wasn't working alone. How she faked a message trail to throw them off. How she burned the studio floor herself to hide the lab remnants. How she'd spent the last year planning this meeting. And how she'd left that folder for me. Why the black square? I asked her. She smiled. To make sure you were still clever. I laughed through tears. Before we left, I burned the journal. We packed only what she needed. Mason found us a safe route out of state and a name change service that wouldn't ask questions. I didn't care about the institute. I didn't care about revenge. All I cared about was the seat beside me. Filled again. I had her back. And this time, they would have to erase the entire world to take her from me.